Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Gopi Jana Balava Girivaradari Yashodanandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnu Bhad, Brahmahamsa Parvajikacharya, so that His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Se Kaho, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrindi Ki, Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath, Shama Kund, Radha Kund, Giri Govardhan Ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki, Ganga Mai ki, Yamuna Mai ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Tulsi Devi ki, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Kantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nita Gaura Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, glories to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswati Vyasam.
Sthojayam Udirayet.
Sthojayam Udirayet.
Nastapareshu Padreshu.
Nastapareshu Padreshu.
Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya.
Bhagavati Utamashloke.
Bhagavati Utamashloke.
Bhaktir Bhakti Nashtaki.
Bhakti Bhagavati Nashtaki.
Before saying the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supreme human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the pure devotees. All that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs established as the record of facts. All right. Bhagavatam. Thank you for opening it to the page. All right. So today we're continuing the instructions by Maharaj Prithu to his citizens. So today we're covering chapter 4. Canto 4, chapter 21, and we'll be doing today text 38. And has anybody noticed that all the verses just about this whole entire section have really good purports? I mean, like, amazing. These instructions. You know, you'll find these instructions everywhere in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I was just reading 12th canto, and I got to the part where Maharaj Parikshit is about to be bit by the snake bird. And of course, we all know throughout the whole entire Srimad Bhagavatam that he's going to be bit by a snake bird. The same thing is when you're reading the Bhagavatam, it's easy to forget that he's about to die. Have any of you had that experience reading through Srimad Bhagavatam? You kind of forget, oh, there's going to be a snake bird that's going to bite Maharaj Parikshit, and like, yeah.
He was crying when Maharaj.
Yeah, you cry because like you read all this nectar and then you get up to 12, you're like, oh, this has to end. Like he actually has to go back to Godhead. And then not only that, but he's got Kashyapa like right there who can counteract snake poison. But then you're thinking, okay, that's good, right? And then Takshakya comes through and he disguises himself as a Brahmin and then like distracts Kashyapa with all these gifts and everything, and then goes up to Maharaj Parikshit and bites him. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this whole there's usually like the Bhagavatam has this flow where there's like this Leela and then there's like these instructions. So after Maharaj Parikshit is bitten by this snake bird that appears, you know, his body goes up into flames. And then his son, who is Janmanjaya, naturally becomes very upset. And then he starts doing this yagya to kill all the snakes. And then when he's doing this yagya to kill all the snakes, he notices that the main culprit, the one that actually bit his father, is not going into the fire. So then he tells the Brahmanas, you know, what's going on? Taksha is not going into the fire. And so then they realize, so he's taking shelter of Indra. So they chant these mantras. Okay, let Indra go into the fire with Taksha. And so Indra is flying on his little airplane with Taksha, you know, flying around. And then when the Brahmanas chant this mantra, let Indra go into the fire along with Taksha, they start falling. And this must have been a very, very long fall, because in between this fall, Brahma comes to Maharaj Janmanjaya and speaks to him philosophy very similar that like we're hearing now. You know, he's trying to instruct Maharaj Janmanjaya, you know, because he's about to be the next leader, the next king. And he's telling him, you know, the living entities in this material world, you know, we suffer our good reactions and our bad reactions. Things that happen to us are based on our karma. And of course we know that Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee, and he was not bound by his karma, but still, this is being used as an example so that Maharaj Janmanjaya, he can be the proper king. He can have the right wisdom to be able to instruct his citizens. And you don't want a king to start their rule by doing an act of revenge. And so Brahma comes, I believe it's Brahma, and he's instructing Maharaj Janmanjaya. Instruction is very similar to like what we're hearing Maharaj Parikshit instruct his citizens, because it's the king's duty to instruct their citizens in Krishna consciousness. So, of course, Maharaj Janmanjaya, he hears these instructions and he stops the sacrifice. But this goes on and on and on throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, because this is the spotless Purana for Kali Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, we are not very much inclined to dry philosophy. Our minds don't like that so much. So therefore, we have this pastime, and then we have the philosophy interwoven in, so that it's easier for us to understand, absorb, digest, etc., etc. Kind of like with the Krishna book too. Prabhupada did this, but he wove in his purports in the Krishna book along with the Leela that's going on. So anyway, right now we're in the philosophy part of the Maharaj Pratipasana. So go ahead and cover text 38. you'll most likely recognize some Sanskrit words in this verse before you even get to the translation. Brahma Deva Purusha. Sorry. Wait, I think that's the wrong meter. Yeah, that's right meter. Sorry. Brahma Deva Brahmanya Deva Purusha Puratano. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Avapa Lakshmin Anapayanim Yasho. Jagat Pavitram Chamahattamang Brahmanya Deva Purusho Paratano. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Avapa Lakshmin Anapayanim Yasho. Jagat Pavitram Chamahattamang Brahmanya Deva Purusho Paratano. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Please chant.
Brahmanya Deva Purusha Puratano. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Avapa Lakshmin Anapayanim Yasho. Jagat Pavitram Chamahattamang.
Brahmanya Deva Purusha Puratano. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Avapa Lakshmin Manapayinam Yasho. Jagat Pavitram Chamahattamagani. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Avapa Lakshmin Manapayinam Yasho. Jagat Pavitram Chamahattamagani. Deva Purusha Puratano.
Brahmanya Deva Purusha Puratano. Nityam Hare Yacharana Bhivandanat. Avapa Lakshmin Anapayanim Yasho. Jagat Pavitram Chamahattamagani.
For word, as you probably all recognize this one. Brahmanya Deva, the Lord of the Brahminical culture. Probably know this one as well. Purushaha, the Supreme Personality. Puratana, the oldest. That's where the word Purana comes from. Nityam, eternal. Harihi, the personality of Godhead. Yet, whose? Chanana, lotus feet. Abhivandanat, by means of worshipping. Avapa, obtains Lakshmin, opulences, Anapayanim, perpetually, Yashaha, reputation, Jagat, universal, like Jagannath, Lord of the universe, Pavatram, purified, Cha, also, Mahat, great, Tama, supreme, Agrani, foremost. It's a translation. Very sweet verse from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ancient, eternal Godhead, who is foremost amongst all great personalities, obtains the opulence of his staunch reputation, which purifies the entire universe by worshiping the lotus feet of those Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Please repeat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ancient, eternal Godhead, who is foremost amongst all great personalities, obtain the opulence of his staunch reputation, which purifies the entire universe by worshiping the lotus feet of those Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Person is described herein as Brahmanya Deva. Brahmanya refers to the Brahmanas, the Vaishnavas, or the Brahminical culture, and Deva means worshipable Lord. Therefore, unless one is on the transcendental platform of being a Vaishnava, or on the highest platform of material goodness as a Brahmana, he cannot appreciate the... Turn the page. Sorry, the page is stuck together. Hold on 1 second. There you go. Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the lower stages of ignorance and passion, it is difficult to appreciate or understand the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the Lord is described herein as the worshipable deity for persons in Brahminical and Vaishnava culture. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Itaya Cha Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. I always tend to say that mantra way too fast every single day. You recognize that when we offer food. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the prime protector of Brahminical culture and the cow. Without knowing and respecting these, one cannot realize the science of God. And without this knowledge, any welfare activities or humanitarian propaganda cannot be successful. The Lord is Purusha, or the Supreme Enjoyer. Not only is he the enjoyer when he appears as a manifested incarnation, but he is the enjoyer since time immemorial, from the very beginning, Puratanaha, and eternally, Nityam, Yachcharnam Bivandanat. Maharaj Prithu said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead attained this opulence of eternal fame simply by worshiping the lotus feet of the Brahmanas. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord does not need to work to achieve material gain, since he is perpetually supremely perfect. He does not need to obtain anything, but still it is said that he obtained his opulences by worshiping the lotus feet of the Brahmanas. Those who are exemplary, these are his exemplary actions. When Lord Shri Krishna was in Dwarka, he offered his respects by bowing down at the lotus feet of Narada. When Sudama Vipra came to his house, Lord Krishna personally washed his feet and gave him a seat on his personal bed. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna offered his respects to Maharaj Yudhisthira and Kunti. The Lord's exemplary behavior is to teach us. We should learn from his personal behavior how to give protection to the cow, how to cultivate Brahminical qualities, and how to respect the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 3:21, Yad yad acharati shreshas tad ive taro janaha. If leading personalities behave in a certain manner, others follow them automatically. Who can be more of a leading personality than the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And whose behavior could be more exemplary? Is it not? It is not that he needed to do all these things to acquire material gain, but all these acts were performed just to teach us how to behave in this material world. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described herein as Mahatma Agranihi. Within this material world, the Mahatmas, our great personalities, are Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, but he is above them all. Narayana Para Yaktyat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is in a transcendental position above everything created within this material. His riches, his beauty, his wisdom, his knowledge, his renunciation, and his reputation are all Jagat Pavitram, universally purified. The more we discuss his opulences, the more the universe becomes pure and pure. In the material world, the opulences possessed by a material person are never fixed. Today, one may be a very rich man, but tomorrow he may become poor. Today, one is very famous, but tomorrow he may be infamous. Materially obtained opulences are never fixed, but all six opulences perpetually exist in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not only in the spiritual world, but also in this material world. Lord Krishna's reputation is fixed, and his book of wisdom, Bhagavad Gita, is still honored. Everything pertaining to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally existing. Okay, very shortly. I'm going to turn the chat. Taminatas Vashiguru Maha Vancha Kalpatra Visha Kripa Sindhi Chapatisna Papigo Vashami Don Maha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. I kept my chart short today just because we had a long purport, and so we'll leave us more time for discussion. Let me take some water. All right. So, Maharaj Prithu saying something very interesting in this verse. He's basically saying that God himself earned his reputation, his great reputation, by worshiping the feet of the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. So Prabhupada makes the point here in this purport that unless one comes to the highest platform of material goodness, he can't appreciate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, he says actually in the lower stages of passion and ignorance, it's very difficult to appreciate or to understand the Supreme Lord. So these modes of material nature, these are forces that influence the living entity. And in the Bhagavad Gita, we can read about them, and it's all over the Bhagavad Gita, but it's talked about specifically in the 14th chapter. And then also, I very much like where Krishna discusses it in the 18th chapter. And again, Krishna gives a whole entire chapter to the three modes of material nature in the 11th canto in the Uddhava Gita. But I like it all, actually. It's all transcendental. It's all nectar. But I really appreciate the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita because Krishna not only explains what these modes are like, but it also shows the different modes of nature in terms of prescribed duties, in terms of knowledge, in terms of understanding, these different things. And so when it is said that one has to come to the platform of goodness to be able to appreciate or to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's nice, but what does that actually look like? How do we actually have to be in our daily lives if we want to be able to understand or really appreciate Krishna? And why is it that the lower modes you can't understand or appreciate Krishna? So this is the first point here that's made in this purport. And Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, when he's talking about duties, he says that prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. And then he talks about what is it to perform one's prescribed duties in the mode of goodness. And he says, Arjuna, when one does the prescribed duty, because it ought to be done, because it should be done. You're not thinking about whether it's difficult, but you're doing it because it's your duty. And renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit. You're renouncing all attachment to whatever you get from doing that duty. That is in the mode of goodness. So we can see that the Brahmanas are very much like this. And when the Brahmanas, one of the reasons why the Brahmanas actually don't get a paycheck in Vedic society is so they can't be bought. The Brahmanas, one of their duties, they have many duties, they're teachers. Even for being a teacher, they don't get a paycheck. That's why the system of dakshin is there. For when the student graduates, they give their teacher, gifts, as soon as dakshin. Of course, we try to implement that in the ISKCON, but a lot of times you'll sign up for a course and you'll see course fee, a few $100, and then there's dakshin at the end of it, depending on the course that you're taking. But that's where the whole idea of dakshin comes from. And then, so this is doing duty in the mode of goodness. And then later, in this 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about knowledge in the mode of goodness, knowledge in the mode of passion, and knowledge in the mode of ignorance. So he says here, that knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand this. And that knowledge by which one sees in every different body, there's a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. So just by reading this, we can understand what Prabhupada is saying in this purport. How, if you're in the mode of passion, it's difficult to understand or appreciate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because when you're in the mode of goodness, you see that everyone is, ultimately, every living entity is part parcel of Krishna. So therefore, you don't want to cause harm to any living entity. But if you're in the mode of passion, you'll make distinctions. He is my friend. He is my enemy. This person is from Palestine. This person is from Israel. So therefore, that's why later in this purport, Prabhupada says, these humanitarian efforts without protection of Brahminical culture or protection of the cows, they won't be successful. And actually, he'll make this point in so many purports that material humanitarian efforts without Krishna consciousness cannot be successful. So he went to this fair, I think on Friday. Well, it was not a fair. It was more like a peace. What was it? Peace festival. Saturday. It was some festival where they had many tables and everybody was claiming to be from a different organization. We had I remember there was not too far from us. There was a table with the Communist Party. They wanted to spread peace through communism. And as someone who minored in Latin American studies, I can tell you that communism has brought anything but peace to Latin America. Actually, often what happens is there's this idea of peace. Okay, we're going to make everyone equal. But often what happens without Krishna consciousness, the modes of passion and ignorance take over. So when the modes of passion and ignorance take over the leaders, then they start to get prideful. Oh, I've gotten this position. Oh, I'm so worthy. I deserve this. I deserve that. And you start to think of people as being beneath you. In fact, these lower modes, they can be very detrimental to spiritual life as well. I had a good friend who served many ISKCON sannyasis throughout the 80s. And he was telling me that several of them that he served had fallen down. And he didn't name names, but he said, I'm going to tell you this just to give you some instruction. He said, the main thing I saw before their big fall was that they started to think that they were a little bit better than everybody else underneath them. So therefore, then they started making offenses to the Vaishnavas. And therefore, because the offenses to the Vaishnavas were happening, when we make offenses to the Vaishnavas, there's actually this verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maybe you know this Kirtaneshwar because you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita every single day. But the one's opulence, they all dry up. You know that verse?
Yeah. I think it's verse you might read it, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. It's like basically you lose everything, like materially and spiritually by these offenses. And so he was noting this to me. He was saying that it really kind of started, with this making this like distinction of, okay, I've got this position of leadership, I'm a little bit better kind of than this person. And then, like being kind of harsh with the devotees, not being very compassionate. And so therefore, Vaishnavas got offended. And because Vaishnavas were being offended, the desire to chant started to go away. And we know when the desire to chant goes away, more material desires further manifest within the heart. So in some cases, this led to some very embarrassing falls from grace. But it all started kind of from this one thing of not, appreciating or respecting the Vaishnavas. So Krishna, this is why it's very important. Krishna comes. Krishna, he's not under these modes of material nature. He's completely above them. In fact, Prabhupada brings out the point in this purport that he tells Arjuna in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I have no work to perform. If you're a Kshatriya, you have to rule the kingdom to maintain your livelihood. If Vaishya, you do agricultural, you do business, whatever. Simply to maintain ourselves, we all have to do some type of work. Krishna doesn't need to do anything because he already has everything. He doesn't have to suck up to anyone. He is the head honcho. But still, how does Krishna himself behave? He behaves by offering all respects to the Brahmanas and to the Vaishnavas to teach others in this world. Because by offering respects to the Brahmanas and to the Vaishnavas, one can attain their qualities, one can attain their blessings, and one can make all spiritual advancement within this world. Because what are the Brahmanas like? They're peaceful, they're self-controlled, they're dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, real Brahmanas, Of course, one might have the title of Brahmana and not behave in this way, which we're going to talk about in a second. The real Brahmanas, they have these actual qualities that's described in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And so therefore, by offering respects to them, by getting their blessings, one can attain these qualities, and also one can get the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like if one serves someone who's very dear to you, naturally, that person also becomes very dear to you. Say, you have a god sibling or a child that's very sick and someone comes and gives them some medicine and heals them. You're very grateful. Or maybe they help your spiritual master. You're very grateful to them. So in the same way, when one serves the Vaishnavas and appreciates the Vaishnavas, one very quickly gets the mercy of Krishna himself. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita is full of examples of how dear the Vaishnavas are to Krishna. And what happens when one offends the Vaishnavas of Krishna, and how that doesn't really please the Lord. So as we know, Lord Chaitanya, he would have these kirtans in the house of Srivas Thakur in the evenings. Srivas Thakur's houses. It's actually, from a material standpoint, it's not this, mansion, but you go there and you feel a lot of spiritual potency. And I've been there, you experience, you go do kirtan in Srivas Thakur's house. It's one of my favorite places. But yeah, it's incredible. It's like, if you don't, I would say when you're in Mayapur, if you don't go anywhere else, there's 3 places you should go: Srivas Thakur's house, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, and Rajpur. That is my opinion. So we get yoga feet, yeah. Well, yoga feet, you can pass by very quickly, but yeah. So anyway, so Lord Chaitanya, he would do these kirtans every evening in the house of Srivas Thakur, and he wouldn't let everybody in this house, because there were people outside that were envious, and this envy, it doesn't please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This they wanted just to be in, just to see what they were doing. It wasn't necessarily to do the kirtan to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's actually said here that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he regularly led the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the house of Srivas Thakur, and he did this every single night for 1 full year. And the ecstatic chanting, it was performed where the doors were closed, so that the non-believers could not gain entrance. And these non-believers, is actually described here that they came to kind of make fun of it, so they were kept out. So it said here that thus the non-believers almost burned to ashes and died out of envy. To retaliate, they planned various ways to give trouble to Srivas Thakur. It's because they couldn't get in, so all right, we're going to get back at Srivas Thakur because he's not letting us in. And then it said, one night, while the kirtan was going on, say Srivas Thakur's house, a brahmana. Now, this is not the brahmanas that are mentioned here in this purport. So brahmana in name only, named Gopala Chapala, the chief of the non-believers, who was talkative and very rough in his speech. So we can see here that brahmanas, they're peaceful, they're self-controlled, so they won't be very rough in their speech. So he's already showing that he doesn't have the qualities of a brahmana. And it said, he placed the paraphernalia for worshiping the goddess Durga outside Srivas Thakur's door. Wanted to show, okay, so he's framing Srivas Thakur. So if any of you have ever been set up in the material world, something you didn't do, maybe you know what that feels like. All right, so Srivas Thakur is being set up big time. We're going to see how he responds. On the upper portion of a plantain leaf, he placed such paraphernalia for worship as the odopala, turmeric, vermilion, red sandalwood, and rice. He placed a pot of wine beside all this. And in the morning, when Srivas Thakur opened his door, he saw this paraphernalia. Now, my response would be, who the hell put this here? Or something like that, Like, I would be really upset. But this is how the devotee responds. Srivas Thakur called for all the respectable gentlemen in the neighborhood. So he's calling everybody to come to his house. And smilingly addressed them as follows. Gentlemen, every night I worship the goddess Bhavani. Since the paraphernalia for worship is present here now, all you respectable brahmanas and members of the highest caste can understand my position. Then all the assembled gentlemen exclaimed, what is this? What is this? Who has performed such mischievous activities? Who is that sinful man? So they're all judging him. They called for the sweeper, who threw all the items of worship far away and cleansed the place by mopping it with a mixture of water and cow dung. But then what happened to Gopala Chapala? Because a Vaishnava, as we see here, never takes offense. But Krishna himself takes offense. So after 3 days, leprosy attacked Gopala Chapala, and blood oozed from the sores all over his body. Incessantly covered with germs and insects, biting him all over his body, Gopala Chapala felt unbearable pain. His entire body burned in distress. Since leprosy is an infectious disease, Gopala Chapala left the village to sit down on the bank of the Ganges underneath a tree. One day, however, he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passing by and spoke to him as follows: "My dear nephew, I am your maternal uncle in our village relationship." So he's trying to appeal to the Lord based off a bodily relationship. So you can see that people who are very much into the mode of passion, they identify with the body and they identify with family. So naturally, they'll help family members out sometimes, even when they don't deserve it. So he's trying to appeal to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on this basis. Hey, we're family. And so he said, "My dear nephew, I am your maternal uncle. As an incarnation of God, you are delivering so many fallen souls. And I am also a greatly unhappy fallen soul. Kindly deliver me by your mercy." So he had some idea of who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was. That he could deliver people from the distress. That he was delivering many fallen souls. So there was some idea. It wasn't like he was totally ignorant. And so, but hearing this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared greatly angry. And in that angry mood, he spoke some words chastising him. "O sinful person, envious of pure devotees, I shall not deliver you. Rather, I shall have you bitten by these germs for many millions of years. You have made Srivas Thakur appear to have been worshipping the goddess Bhavani. Simply for this offense, you will have to fall down into hellish life for 10 million births. I have appeared in this incarnation to kill the demons, and after killing them, to preach the call to devotional service." After saying this, the Lord left to take his bath in the Ganges, and that sinful man did not give up his life, but continued to suffer. When Sri Chaitanya, after accepting the renounced order of life, went to Jagannath Puri, and then came back to the village of Kulia, upon his return, that sinful man took shelter at the Lord's lotus feet. The Lord, being merciful to him, gave him instructions for his benefit. The Lord's telling him now, okay, how can you be delivered? "You have committed an offense at the lotus feet of Srivas Thakur. First, you must go there and beg for his mercy. And if he gives you his blessing, and you do not commit such sins again, you will be freed from these reactions." And then the Brahmana, Gopala Chapala, went to Srivas Thakur and took shelter of his lotus feet. And by Srivas Thakur's mercy, he was freed from all sinful reactions. So this is an example. When one offends those who are very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if you know who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, who he's capable of, even if you have some relationship with him, you're in his family, still, if you make some offense to the devotees, the Brahmanas, Krishna, he's not going to like it very much. Because the devotees, and he explains why. He tells Uddhava why in the Uddhava Gita. He says, because the Vaishnavas, they give up everything. They give up all comforts. They give up their family. All these different things. So much, everything to be my devotee. So for that, they purchased me with their love. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. But there's this whole example of, of Krishna telling Uddhava why the Vaishnavas are very dear to him. And so think about it, Krishna is a person. If somebody gives up, sacrifices a lot for you, naturally, they will become very dear to you. So for Krishna, because the devotees are giving up everything, devotees are very dear to Krishna. So by getting the mercy of the Vaishnavas, one also becomes very dear to Krishna. This is why you'll see many times when there's an important event, devotees will invite other Vaishnavas, such as they buy a new house. Okay, we're inviting all the devotees over for kirtan and prasadam and going to feed the Vaishnavas. It's to get the mercy of the Vaishnavas. Okay, I'm getting married. So what do? They invite senior devotees, invite Vaishnavas. is not to show off, but it's actually to get blessings. In the material world, people do these things to show off. But in Vaishnava culture, do these things to get the mercy of the devotees. Well, you notice when a child is born and they have the grain ceremony, again another festival is performed and devotees, and you give them prasadam and you have a kirtan to get their blessings for the child. You know, different events. You always see this. You know, having different festivals, inviting the Vaishnavas, have these sweet, loving exchanges with each other. It's very beautiful. And so this is actually what, and Krishna sees this. Krishna sees that devotees are very pleased. He pours out his mercy on that devotee. And I've personally seen, in just the time that I've been in ISKCON, how if somebody has this mentality of serving the Vaishnavas, if they're a total like sense enjoyer or whatever, they don't have much sense control, they'll get a lot of mercy from Krishna just for wanting to please the devotees. But however, I've also seen people that like extremely like they're trying so hard to control their senses, and they might be very good at it, eating very little, sleeping very little, maybe chanting so many rounds, but yet if they're offensive to the devotees, eventually, gradually all this will dry up and they'll go away. There's one example of somebody I heard that was chanting 64 rounds every day. And one day he just gave everything up. So we have to be very careful about offending the devotees. Because we need the devotees. By serving the devotees, by serving those devotees who are free from all vice, we gain the desire for hearing the message of Vasudeva. So we actually need this. So Krishna, therefore, he comes and he gives the example how to serve the devotees, how to please the devotees. He does this, as Prabhupada is saying, by bowing down to Narada, by worshiping Sudama Brahmana, which is the exact opposite, by the way, of how Drona and Drupad are with each other, or how Drupad was with Drona. Krishna gives this example, when he becomes prince of Dwarka. Sudama Brahmana comes. Krishna worships him very nicely. But yet in the Mahabharata, when Drupad was in the Gurukul with Drona, Drona was a Brahmana, and he told Drona, one day I'll give you half my kingdom. Until later, Drupad became king, and Drona was very poor, so Drona went to Drupad. And it's described that Drona didn't even have enough to give his son milk. And so he went to Drupad, to beg, to remind him, oh, I'm very poor, and I remember once you said that you would give me half your kingdom. We were very good friends in the Gurukul. But as what tends to happen when one gets in the mode of passion and they get some position, they have this idea, okay, now I'm better than others. So then Drupad looks at Drona and says, why are you talking to me as if we are equals? He gave up all friendly relationships with him right there. He got his kingdom, and he forgot completely about Drona. But Krishna is so kind. Krishna's position is eternal. Unlike any other king, Prabhupada says here at the end of the purport that we're getting to now, that Krishna's opulences are forever. In the material world, one may be very famous one day and infamous the next day. But Krishna's position is fixed. But even with that fixed position, still, he never forgets his devotees. He never forgets the Brahmanas. So we can see the difference here between Drupad and between Krishna himself. So Prithu Maharaj is leaving this instruction for his citizens, reminding them. And this isn't going to be the only verse on this topic. Out of all the instructions in Maharaj Prithu, I think coming up here before we get to the end of the chapter, there's 3 that are about the importance of serving the Brahmanas and serving the Vaishnavas. So whenever something is repeated in Shastra, again and again, it's very important. So we should remember that. And also, reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, if you're having trouble, you're finding fault with devotees, that'll really knock it out of you. In my experience, what I found reading Chaitanya Bhagavatam as well, seeing the love exchanges amongst Vaishnavas. Well, anyway, there's a lot more I could say, but we're running out of time, so I'll take questions or comments. Yes.
You're mentioning the sacrifice in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Sacrifice in the mode of goodness is when one does one's duty without being attached to the result, without considering their own happiness and distress, and then sacrifice in the mode of ignorance is renouncing one's duty based on bodily discomfort. That's a very, very difficult line to always attain or to delineate between. How do we know? Sometimes it seems like our duty and the person that may be giving us that duty is not clear, or the duty that we've been given seems like it's sinful, it's offensive, versus rather than actually service. Do we follow the authority, or what do we do? And that's we don't want to make an offense to Krishna. We're trying to serve Krishna. We love Krishna, and we love the devotees, and we love our seniors. But how do we deal with it's like the Bali Maharaj situation. So how do we deal?
So in other words, when we're being given our duty by authority, but it might seem that duty is kind of simple now. Bali Maharaj ran into that. Arjuna kind of also ran into that at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. In
Arjuna's case, it was at least it was Krishna.
Yeah, in Arjuna's case, at least it was Krishna. But it was Krishna. But at the same time, we can see that Arjuna didn't necessarily just say, "Okay, I'll do it." Krishna spends 18 chapters convincing Arjuna, why you should fight based off of Shastra.
Based off the fact that that's what Krishna wants ultimately.
Based on the fact that that's what he wants ultimately. But Krishna gives all these arguments to defeat Arjuna's argument.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's not that, Krishna tells Arjuna to fight the second chapter.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually start with the 8th chapter. And so that's why you have this whole thing about karma yoga and, it goes on as karma yoga, bhakti yoga. So there's all these different reasons. Ultimately, karma is to fight because, I want you to. But that's not the only argument. That's not the only thing Krishna says. Krishna doesn't say that to the very end.
Yeah, that's true.
And then before he says that, he asks Arjuna, do you understand my instructions?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm telling you to fight?
Because we're ultimately on the principle of what does Krishna want? And so, in the same sense, we can say, no, I'm not going to follow because that's not what Krishna wants. I know that's not what Krishna wants. On the other sense of things, but it's like it would seem that that's what Krishna wants. But how would I, that's the confusion. So it's very confusing for sometimes.
Yeah, it can be confusing. So if you're being given some instruction about some authority that seems simple, and you have some doubts, based on Shastra, this seems simple, you can ask. That's what we're supposed to do ultimately. Like the Kumara says, Arjuna asks Krishna questions. He doesn't just shut up for the whole Bhagavad Gita. So you can ask and see their response. Also, there's Shiksha gurus that you can go to.
Yeah.
Depending on the instruction. I don't know the particular situation, but I do know examples of devotees who have been asked to do things that seem pretty bad, and they're not sure about it. And so they might go to a god sibling of the authority that's telling them to do this, or another authority of theirs, and get it checked. And then also get it checked by Shastra. Which is why we have Guru Sadhya Shastra. We don't just have one particular thing that we're getting instruction. So, and ultimately, if the instruction is coming from Guru, one of the Guru's duties is to clear the doubts of the disciple.
Thank you.
Krishna had that mentality with Arjuna. And Arjuna even challenged Krishna. Krishna, how is it that you spoke these instructions to the sun god? The sun god sing with you. And then Krishna explained. So that's always there. It's not that if somebody gives us some instruction all the time, we're just like, yes, I'll do it no matter what.
Yeah.
But there has to be intelligence there too, based off of the other two things.
Thank you.
Yes.
If we if we try to understand the opulences of Krishna, or the 6 opulences, and try to really focus on that, doesn't that just overpower the whole material world or the whole material modes that we can fall into? If we focus on the opulences, just everything else seems so insignificant. And if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, definitely, especially if one can keep their mind there. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the whole 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is spoken, because it helps us see Krishna on almost anything, the light of the sun, light of the moon. And then also, Prabhupada had written this book, The Light of the Bhagavad, helps us see Krishna's opulences and Krishna within nature. We can be reminded of this. Also, sometimes other devotees do play games sometimes where we would give a word and somebody would have to connect that to Krishna or one of Krishna's opulences like that. So that keeps us Krishna conscious, focusing on Krishna's opulences. Reading the pastimes of Krishna helps us, remember remember his 6 opulences, because these 6 opulences are shown in detail in the pastimes. But ultimately, one can keep their mind there. But the mind completely doesn't stay there without service to the Vaishnavas.
There's a comment on that we can always thinking of Krishna, but you have to have the right mood. I mean, Kamsa was always thinking of Krishna's opulences constantly.
Yeah.
But he was horribly offensive and offended all the Vaishnavas. So in that sense, he was in deep Maya. He was in total Maya.
Right.
So
Dr. Prabhu quotes that verse all the time from like the rest of the Sindhi, that it has to be done favorably.
Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Gyanam Karmani Radhitamanu Kulena Krishna Nashiyana Bhakti Uttama. But Uttama. The other one's Uchite. Yeah, Hrishikesh. Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. But the thing I was thinking about Chandrika is Krishna says, Mam Chayo Vyabhicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate, that when one engages in constant Bhakti Yoga seva, that seva, that keeps you Sagunan Samatitya, you're automatically above the modes of material nature.
Yeah.
By that. So you have to have that, right? The mood.
Yeah. My God, I'm keeping you guys from breakfast. I'm so sorry. This is real nice. All right. All right, bro.